Hello out there, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Brous Blades Icon, and the Icon here is a 2018 design from Brous Blades in conjunction with TJ Schwartz. TJ Schwartz designed the knife, and so yeah, a very cool collaboration, one from two guys that I just like a lot of their stuff, and when I saw this knife for the first time, I knew I wanted it because it's just extremely good looking. And the good news, well, maybe the good news, maybe the bad news, depending on how you look at it, that's the best part of the knife, is the way that it looks. It is just a extremely attractive knife, I think. I think the lines and the design are just very eye-catching. But when you transition from that to the functional aspects of the knife, there are some opportunities. There are some things that keep this from being a big home run, and sort of some things just left on the table that I think could have easily been a little bit better. So we're going to go through all that today. We're going to talk about this knife, who it's for, who won't really appreciate it, and yeah, just some of the things that I think could have been done better and some of the things that I think are just great. All right, so getting right into it with the size comparisons and the blade, you can take a look and see we have about a 3.25 inch cutting edge of D2 steel. When we're looking at size comparisons here, we have the Mini Griptilian right here. I've got the Paramilitary 2, which interestingly enough is sort of comparable in the cutting edge, but then you can see the overall length is very, very different. Here's a knife we'll be talking about relatively soon on the channel, and that is the QSP Parrot. So, very cool little budget blade there. What else can we show? One more. Alright, how about the Civivi? Here's the backlash. So again, comparable cutting edge, but a lot longer in at the handle for the Civivi. So the Brous, just because it is a little bit shorter maybe than some of the other 3.25 inch cutting edge knives out there, it's not going to be that heavy. 3.22 ounces. This is an aluminum frame, I guess technically, but when you take a look at it, it almost seems like a stainless steel frame lock with an aluminum overlay. I don't know, I guess I consider the stainless steel liners on this, but it's really sort of up for debate in knives like this where you have, you know, a lot of skeletonizing and, you know, you're not really sure if it's the frame that's aluminum or if that's an overlay. Generally, the way that I look at it, though, in this case is that if the pivot screw goes through the scale, then that is technically part of the frame, and that's sort of how I see it. So I guess I would call this an aluminum frame and a liner lock, but I'm sure there are some people who might differ, and it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you know, the knife is the same no matter what you call it. So yeah, but still 3.22 ounces, not particularly heavy, very EDC friendly in that regard. And then our steel is D2. There are a number of different configurations for this knife. One of the things that's really cool about it and good about Brous blades in general is they come out with a bunch of different colors. When I first saw this knife, Stasa23 was handling one in a really nice deep blue. I ended up going with the purple, but they do have like satin versions. They have a bunch of different colors. They have acid wash, just plain black blades. So yeah, I think the blade on this is extremely attractive. That nice stonewash. And the steel is D2. And that's what Brous uses. And I want to talk about D2 for a second because nowadays it seems like D2 is a budget steel. And I mean, some people are going to say like the price point of this knife coming in at 170, 180. I think at Blade Show I got it for like 160. Maybe that was a sale or something. But I've seen it for 170, 180 depending on what configuration you get. D2, well, maybe that's a little bit pricey, and I know that that argument is going to be coming, and all I can say is that when D2 is done well, I'm comfortable paying the price that 5 years ago we paid for D2. You know, just because it's now in a ton of different budget knives and, you know, cheaper than $20 on this Ganzo here, which is crazy. You know, it still performs on a level that makes it, for me, you know, have a lot of value. So, you know, it's interesting where the market is going with D2. I've made a lot of videos about D2, and it's just, yeah, I'm curious to see what the makers like Brous and other people who use D2 will do in the future, if they'll stick to it and keep charging what they are for it because they're confident in the rest of the knife, or if those prices will start to go down, or if they'll change materials because, like I said, D2 you can get, you know, very, very cheap nowadays, but it still does perform really well. And so I'm happy with the D2 on this knife. I don't mind the choice. My experience with Brous D2 has been excellent with the Bionic 2, and then I tested the Bionic XL, and it was excellent. So anyway, D2, good steel, no complaints. Time to move on. All right, now as we move on back, there is a little bit of jimping, just a little bit, but it's good jimping. And it is a saving grace for the ergonomics of this knife in a lot of ways. Just a few spots, and if we get it close enough, you'll probably be able to see it isn't particularly sharp, but it does grab the thumb just enough to give you good purchase. And looking at the spine of the knife, you can see there is a little depression, so you can choke up a little bit and then still further on your thumb get the benefits of that jimping. So yeah, I think the jimping was executed very, very well. As we move back though to the frame and talk about the rest of the ergonomics, the aluminum is slick. It is not, well, there's really no other way to say it. It's just slick. The good news, I guess, is that there's not too much of it, and there is a little bit of like texturing here, which helps give you comfort and it lets you know where your fingers are. But when you're holding the knife, you've really got to be able to use that jimping in order to lock in. And the guard from the flipper here helps as well, but there are just a number of spots over the course of the knife where it is a little bit sharp. Even though the aluminum scale is slick, I don't think that it is like going to pose a problem with security and the knife slipping out of your hand. But I just feel like if you grip the knife and you don't have it perfectly, there's just a number of areas where, so we take a look at this, you know, this top frame, there's a number of areas where everything just doesn't by design line up quite right. So you have a sharp corner like here, but then you also have a little bit of sharpness on the other side where the steel begins, you know, and so there's just a number of spots that if your fingers or your thumb or your palm, especially here on these corners, if it's not just right, it won't be comfortable. It's one of those things that when you're using the knife for any duration of time, that's where it starts to bother you. You know, holding it in hand like this, it's just fine. Cutting a couple things, you know, light duty, one box you have to break down, that's fine. But, you know, when you're using this knife for more than 2 or 3 minutes at a time, that's when that stuff starts to creep up on you, and you start to get these hot spots, you know, in a number of different areas around the knife. So ergonomically, that's really the big, the first really big opportunity. Not really a deal breaker, but yeah, just certainly something that could have been done a little bit better. But I don't know, when I look at the knife, you know, even for the first time, it doesn't look like it's going to be that comfortable. So I don't think you should go into a purchase like this thinking that it's going to be the most comfortable knife. But anyway, moving on back, you can see we're relatively open when it comes to the frame. A little bit of milling there on the inside. So that's definitely a positive and keeps it relatively light. We do have this back spacer, which, I don't know, it's interesting. The shape of it, it's this really massive lanyard hole, and it comes to like this square. So take a look. You know, it comes to like this square, and I guess maybe that's for aesthetics, but I feel like it could have been rounded a little bit more. Maybe you know, lessen the size of the hole overall, but made it a little more comfortable at the back end. And I don't know, maybe that would have improved some other aspects of the knife, but again, not really a huge deal there. I do want to talk about the hardware, and then we'll get to the clip. The hardware is really interesting, and I've been one of those people before who doesn't really love proprietary hardware. I don't like having to get a special tool, and even though like something that's proprietary, you know, it does have this like exclusive kind of feel to it. You know, it's sort of a pain in the ass when it comes to having to get a special tool. And the genius of this is that this kind of hardware here is proprietary in that it's different from everything else, but you can use a Torx driver to loosen the screws and tighten them. It still works, even though it looks like it wouldn't. So here, I have a driver right here. The pivot, a T8 sort of works, but you can see I scratched the pivot up really bad with a T8 because I started to strip it. But a T9 is really what works. Tightening and loosening. Yeah, it just fits in perfectly. So pretty interesting there. And then still T6s on the body screws here. You can see one body screw that's off color. I actually lost it when I took the knife apart. And when I ordered the replacement, and the people at Brous were excellent with this, they got back to me within like just a few minutes when I placed that request. I didn't realize there were different color screws, so I didn't say I needed a black one, so they sent me a satin one, and yeah, I've got to get back in touch with them and maybe get another one, or maybe just paint this guy. I'm not sure, but regardless, not that big of a deal. I was able to get that back in there and continue forward, I guess, with this review. The other aspect of the knife, though, that really hampers things, the worst thing about this knife is the action. It's on bearings just like almost everything else from Brous. It's a flipper. You can see how like small the flipper is, and I got to tell you, now you're not going to notice it in this video because it's been improved, but this thing was just so hard to actuate. The detent was so hard to break. It was super stiff. It just seemed like it wasn't smooth enough to open it. I mean, there were times, if you ever have a knife where you like when you're pushing on like the frame and it keeps the knife from being able to flip open with like a frame lock flipper, you know what I'm talking about? You ever have that situation where you're, oh, I'm pushing on the frame so the knife won't open? That's how this knife felt all the time. And it was so hard to open, and it was painful, and it was just almost a deal breaker. And I ended up taking the knife apart and polishing everything on the inside and cleaning it up and, you know, smoothing all the surfaces in order to make them just move better. And that really helped a lot. The other thing that helped a lot, and this is not an advertisement or anything, but I mean, I've never used any kind of like special lube for knives, but I got this knife pivot lube pretty recently, and I put some of that in there, and after I had like smoothed everything out, it improved the knife a whole lot. But even now, it's still a little bit stiff to open and close. It's much improved, but if you're not willing to put in that kind of time, man, I mean, I thought this knife was going to break in. You know, I've had some stiff knives before. I thought this would break in, and it just didn't. And it was frustrating. And, you know, had I not taken everything apart, then, yeah, I don't know that I would have been able to really embrace this knife at all and use it much at all. So, yeah, I think from factory, as it was when I unboxed it, sort of a deal breaker. Yeah, the fact that I'm able to improve it, I mean, that, again, makes me able to use it and review it. But, yeah, up until that point, it was just a no-go. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Moving to the clip, we do have it's not a deep carry clip really at all. So just that to keep in mind. There is a little bit of real estate sticking up, but not too big of a deal. And yeah, it's not like it's in any way going to slide out or anything. And there's good retention on it. And yeah, I don't really mind the clip. One position though, so you're not really going to be able to move that around. Let's see, lockup. Oh yeah, lockup is excellent, fantastic. No up and down or left and right. One thing I want to get back to though, and I just omitted this a minute ago, but when I did take the knife apart, one of the things that was odd is that, let me see if I just have a blade lying around. No, of course not. But one of the things that was odd, and I'll show the video, is that instead of having the cutouts in like the blade for the bearings on each side, the way they did it was just a little bit different. And one of the cutouts was in the stainless steel and the other one was on the other side of the blade. And it was just odd, and I thought that maybe that might be part of the reason why it just didn't like perform quite as well as it could have. But yeah, take a look at that and let me know what you think in the comments down below, because it's something that I've seen in some like budget and cheaper blades, but never something quite like this. All right, so you've seen everything about this knife. You know, you see what it's like. The verdict for me, it's cool. It's really good looking. If you are someone who is a fan of Brous blades and likes TJ Schwartz designs and you like the look of this knife, I'm sure you'll be able to find this configuration in something that is very appealing to you. And also, even though Brous does have now a budget line that's like sub $100, most of their production knives, they really don't go for less than $200. You know, they do have a few models now, but a lot of them are a lot more expensive. And so if you are a Brous fan, this might be one that you'd be interested in, because, you know, getting maybe a used one or waiting for a sale or a discount, you could find this in the $150 range, and that might be really agreeable. For me, the purchasing of this, the experience of getting this from Jason Brous himself at Blade Show, it adds a lot of value to the knife. But I think had I not done that, I would have sold this knife already and just moved on from it, you know. The sentimental value that it has is what keeps it in my collection for now. But overall, I think there's just a whole lot better knives out there for the price. And even though I am just a really good fan of Brous himself and of D2 and the steel and the materials on this one, I think it could have been done better. So yeah, overall, not a complete fail, but definitely not a knife that's for everyone. So that's really all I've got to say about it, guys. Any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know down below. Now that we have seen at least I have seen all of the TJ Schwartz 2018 knives that I will for the year, I got to tell you, the CRKT Caligo, $30 knife, that's his best. It's as good as it gets. So yeah, pretty good stuff on that knife, but this one, like I said, just not hitting on all cylinders. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll talk with you soon. Have a good one.